Spectre is an immersive installation that tells a cautionary tale of society. It uses algorithms and the technologies and tools that the online digital influence industry uses, and it reveals a story to the teller that is personalised to them and powered by their personal data. I've known Barney for a long time, you know, and Ruth, Daniel, and Alison as well. So it's we've been on the same cultural scenes and networks for a long time, and then I remember being told about this amazing new fund that was starting up, and just seeing how hyped and excited my friends were about that, it became clear that it was going to be something quite special, and I was lucky enough to be invited to apply in 2016 for some funding. No, so just for clarity, so Futures Ventures funded a project that I was involved in called the Brandalism Project in 2016 to 2017. Futures Ventures put a small match fund into this development part of the Spectre project. So we're lucky to have their support for this R&D phase. And they've also made it possible for us to do like a micro residency here at this amazing space that is Walk the Plank, you know. So multifaceted support for the Spectre project, but originally brought in to get funding in 2016. So basically the match funding that's been provided by Futures Venture Foundation, which is £2,000, has allowed us to bring in kind of consultancies and bring in experts that we wouldn't have normally been able to bring in for this really critical R&D phase of the project. So in a cash sense, that's been really super valuable because we've got insights, knowledge, expertise that have just made the project stronger. And just in a more general supportive capacity within kind support, they've allowed us to come here to Walk the Plank Studios, which is a really open, accessible and inspiring space to work and to develop in. And obviously having all the other artists around this weekend has only just made that more meaningful for us as well. I've been more organising the fundraising side, so should I?
I mean, my experience is more with academic grants, as I work as a professor, so not so much with arts funding, which is a bit different. So maybe you can.
There's quite a lot of similarities, isn't there? But I mean, as far as the process goes, so with Futures Venture, it's in some ways it's quite informal, right? But it does follow a traditional philanthropic model, right, which is a top-down distribution of wealth controlled by a few, right, which is how any board functions, right, you know, so it's a similar model. It's a lot more accessible in some ways to apply for because you don't need to go through a 20-page online portal like the Arts Council, right? So there's a lot of barriers to entry for those that might be less privileged or even just less able to articulate what it is they want to do, right? Which has a huge implication because if you can't articulate it, you can't speak their language. If you can't speak their language, you're not going to get the money. So there's more of an informal application process with Futures Ventures, you know, quite a lot is conversation-led. And then you do formally apply, you present your project of what you want to do. I think there's quite a variety of different ways, formats or mediums you can do that, right? So it does make it more accessible. But just on the flip side, if I wasn't known to a trustee or an advisor, I wouldn't have been invited to apply, you know? So there's like this privilege and power that's already built into that as a selection process, you know? Those amazing artists out there who are just unknown or just don't know someone who's influential or who is connected, you know, just by chance. So, you know, how they're reached and how they're brought in for Futures Ventures to facilitate their, you know, growth as an artist is a question that's in my head, you know. I mean, there's a difference between oppressive structures, you know, and supportive structures, obviously, and I think that so much of what Futures Ventures does and the way it tries to facilitate and support artists is really meaningful. But there are those barriers to entry still that do exist, you know. And it's very difficult within the context of the way that this fund's been constructed to allow for it to tick all boxes, right? Because it's a finite sum, it has to be given out in certain amounts per year, and there's only certain recipients or certain level of recipients that can access it. and underpinning that is a certain level of infrastructure for their charity itself, right? So they can't do big open calls. They haven't got the resources, funds, time, you know, whatever, to be able to facilitate that type of thing. So it's always been a very close thing. So whilst it ticks a lot of boxes, yeah, it's difficult to tick more, you know, just because of the constraints that have been placed on the actual fund itself, right? So yeah, it's done a lot of things right, you know, definitely, but there could be some, priority applied to strategically to change some of those other conditions, right, or make it more accessible in more ways.
I've had a very positive experience. One of the things that I miss working in academia is working with a team of sort of like-minded people with different skill sets, with different backgrounds. And so to get to do that here in a very friendly and open, welcoming space has been great. The other thing I notice in terms of funding is that there are so many restrictions put on academic grants. I mean, you have to get everything approved in advance, and if you want to buy something, it often takes months. And it's very refreshing to see, you know, to be able to realize we need a user testing consultant to come in for a few hours, and to be able to make that happen, you know, within a day or two is it's not just encouraging, it helps the project get to the next step so much faster. It's really refreshing, coming from the context I'm used to.
Yeah, and that's just to build on that as well, right? Because I totally agree. It's like having the flexibility, you know, and the trust actually to be like, yeah, we get what you're doing, we believe you can deliver it, you know, and not have such tight constraints as to when things change as projects develop. It's been amazing. I mean, for Brandelism in 2016, it was fundamental to the project, the grant that Futures Ventures gave, because we could employ someone part-time for the first time, you know, in 6 years. So it's like, it's a big thing, you know, huge thing, fundamental thing, and it just reduces that precarity, you know, the risk that's associated with doing radical work in the kind of marginal spaces, you know, where you're trying to change the norms and behaviours, or the narratives really that exist in society, and having that fundamental support to just take that pressure off for a little bit is such a game changer, you know.
And to just follow up on that, I mean, when you have a more constrained grant structure, it almost makes you have to have a very rigid idea of what the project will be and have it not change over time. And that's the exact opposite of the way the art practice works, where you're constantly iterating, you're constantly figuring out what's at the heart of the project, and it's naturally going to move in new directions. And if the granting structure doesn't support that, then, you know, it's not helpful in the way that it could be.
No, it was long. I think it was like 9 months or something from when first being kind of approached to then an actual decision being made. It's a long time, you know. So there's things there to be considered with regards to privilege, right? It's like you've got to be pretty privileged in many ways to be able to like dedicate yourself to art or activism full time, you know. Either like you can earn money commercially and it's easy, you know, and you just create that breathing space. But if you're doing non-commercial work, and you have maybe access to less support structures, networks, things like that, it's incredibly difficult to maintain that full time, you know. So having a lengthy process like that can undermine the viability of the thing in the first place, you know. Because sometimes, especially for activists, you know, in a political context and a social one, it's like, obviously needs are immediate, you know, needs are immediate, and like things need to be responded to, you know, sometimes. And obviously there's no funding that allows that.
In the academic context, that would be, you know, light speed.
Yeah, but it's not good.
It could be better, but I mean, you know, if you try to write something that is cutting edge and get it published in academia, you know, it ends up coming out 2-3 years later, and
yeah.
You know, a lot of the points are irrelevant or have been stated in media already, and
yeah.
so that's quite hard. Well, it was great to get the feedback from the people who saw our brief presentation yesterday, just sort of, around the coffee machine and such, and then we've also been able to do some testing with users here, so showing them bits of our interface and getting their feedback. And these are people who happen to be around for this weekend, and we've gotten some great insight into where we are now and where we need to go.
Yeah, it's all nourishing as well, right? Just to have the hive, the nucleus, everyone's orbiting it, feeding in and kind of cross-pollinating as well, right? So even like just the informal chats in the spaces in between have helped to structure new ideas and new approaches and things like that. So it's been really rich. I'd also like to add whiskey and drum and bass to the things that have helped.
Those were key elements of the experience, I feel like.
Oh, and Uncle Taco.
Yeah, the flea circus.
Yeah, the flea circus was a big hit.
Knievel.
Yeah. It's all good. We are going to tour the project. Spectre will be a tour and installation, but we're just kind of figuring out the details of that yet.
For the next week, we're going to be here at, the next 5 days or so here at Walk the Plank, banging out page by page, how we want it to work. So the food has been really good.
It's on a base level.
Sweet. Those things are important.
You
totally.
gotta stay energized.
Yeah.
Coffee.
What's not been discussed? So it's easy for me to answer this a bit more because I think I've got quite a deep relationship with Futures Ventures. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for Futures Ventures. So there's a huge amount of respect and gratitude for those that have facilitated these types of opportunities. For kind of deeply political and socially active artists, I think just trying to be if there's anything like constructive or critical to feedback. I think it's good. Yeah, but I think it's been touched on, like accessibility, the privilege that's embodied in the selection process and the distribution of the funds, like who gets to decide what's spent where, how that power, being honest and open about how that power operates. It's stupid for me to say it's bad because I've been so grateful to receive it, right? Because I'm here, right? But there's a wider question there about power and privilege, So, what kind of models could be looked at to decide where funds go as opposed to the traditional board model, if that is even of interest, because there's other funders doing some really interesting things around that. But it depends on what direction Futures Venture wants to go, So I'd hope that rather than just come with preconceptions about what could be better now, I'd rather hope that those that have been funded are just going to be continuing in that conversation with Futures Ventures core staff, to help make what they do more stronger, more relevant and more impactful. So that's what I'd like to see, rather than critique and judge now, just pathways for developing those conversations like we've had today, and yesterday, both in the space there where they've sought that kind of like wider kind of community of practice feedback and helping to move things forward in a consensus or a collective form.